A happy Wednesday to you from lcpioneers.com live, presented by PioStream, our 4 day a week informational talk show available to you on Facebook Live and archived on YouTube, youtube.com/lcpios. We keep you connected with student athletes, coaches, alumni, and members from the Lewis and Clark College community Tuesday through Friday at 11:30 a.m. Pacific time. Hello, I am Ryan Goff. I am the play-by-play voice and director of athletic communications for Lewis and Clark, the Pioneers, and we are a Division III NCAA institution out of Portland, Oregon, competing with other institutions from throughout Northwest Oregon and the state of Washington as a part of the Northwest Conference. 19 intercollegiate athletics programs, and a chance to keep you connected, as I mentioned, with everyone involved with Lewis and Clark athletics. Over 430 institutions nationwide because of NCAA Division III. So a chance for all of our student athletes to compete on a national scale. And then, of course, Lewis and Clark, the college, sporting a very robust overseas study program, a chance for our student athletes and students alike to get international experience and experiential liberal arts education. We are excited to welcome in our guest in just a few moments, a recently graduated senior from the Lewis and Clark men's tennis program. We'll talk to Ryan Hayes, highly decorated with both, all of his accomplishments throughout the entire 4 years at Lewis and Clark, including magna cum laude, double major graduate, and he was one of the recently graduated seniors who went from expecting to have graduation on a stage to having graduation online, just like classes moved online in the middle of March because of the coronavirus pandemic. And it's always great to get perspective of what that moment was like, especially for a senior like Ryan was. Excited to talk to him about his perspective there and then kind of see what's in his future as we bring you these stories 4 days a week on the show. Do invite you to get connected with us. You can in the Facebook comments below. Also, always appreciate the reactions, so you can throw a thumbs up, a heart as you go along too. What that does is help other people find the stream, and that's always appreciated as well. This is something that we're into week 16 of on the show and planning to kind of continue that in the future. So certainly would appreciate that as you go along. You can ask a question for Ryan in the comments, and you can always email us to sports@lclark.edu if you have questions for an upcoming guest or even want to suggest a future guest that should join us. Of course, to on Twitter and Instagram, LC Pioneers, our handle in both of those locations. I want you to go to lcpioneers.com. That is our website, and you can read about the latest information that's happening in Lewis and Clark athletics. Northwest Conference Scholar athletes were named a couple weeks back. Ryan Hayes, our guest today, was one of them for men's tennis. Over 80 names from Lewis and Clark athletics put onto that list, including Sean Richardson of men's cross country and track and field, and Lisa Kumasaka of softball, both the first team selections. Each program, each institution in the Northwest Conference has one first teamer for a women's sport and a men's sport. So Lisa and Sean were the representatives accordingly. I have reached out to Lisa too, hoping to have her on a future show of lcpioneers.com. All of our shows archived at youtube.com/lcpios. Again, we're in week 16, so you can go back and watch any of our shows on demand. Go to youtube.com/lcpios, click on the full playlist for lcpioneers.com live, and you can see anything that you might have missed, including Rod Attia, former men's tennis student athlete who has joined us, and head coach Jimmy Chow from the tennis program as well. You can find all of those on our YouTube page. So let's bring in our guest, again, a recently graduated senior from the Lewis and Clark men's tennis program. Excited to welcome in Ryan Hayes on lcpioneers.com live. Ryan, appreciate you taking the time on this Wednesday to join us. And I want to start with that spring semester. I can't imagine the chaos all of our student athletes felt with canceled seasons and shifting to remote learning, but especially for a senior too. Kind of walk us in from your perspective. What was the spring semester like, especially those final 6 or 7 weeks?
Yeah, it was definitely a crazy experience. Everything happened really quickly. I feel like we went from season as usual, and then all of a sudden people started talking about, like, oh, maybe we wouldn't be going on trips, or not necessarily just any trip, but like traveling to the Wits or something far away. Like maybe we would just be going to Willamette or just be going to Linfield. Um, and then I remember someone in the NBA started getting sick, and then the entire NBA got canceled, and then that kind of resonated with us, like, oh well, if they're getting canceled, like we for sure not happening. Um, so I remember we had, I think we played PLU, Pacific Lutheran, and it was kind of just a normal match, and then maybe 2 days later, we found out that our trip to Whitman and Whitworth was canceled. And then from there, it kind of just snowballed to the entire school year being canceled.
Yeah, it was crazy how quickly that kind of changed and shifted from maybe some slow things happening to you talked about Rudy Gobert, the Utah Jazz player, and from that
Yeah.
moment, basketball tournaments are getting canceled, and then immediately we're put on notice and postponement shortly after that, cancellation a few days after that. Uh, as a senior student athlete, talk about your classmates too. Like, what was the disappointment like not getting a chance to compete in your final year, especially with all the years leading up to it?
Yeah. I mean, we definitely, there were three of us, including me, that were seniors on our team. And I know that we all were super disappointed. I think each person had different like reasons for being disappointed, definitely, but I think we all definitely shared one reason in that we had been spending 4 years to have this big show of a senior year, and we just didn't get it. Um, yeah, I mean, you just spent so many years putting effort into something that makes you happy and really makes your life feel complete in a way. And just to not have that whole part of your identity just taken away is kind of not great.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely understandable, and you guys, no expectation that anything would be any different. Then you have to shift gears and go remote learning, and then have
Yeah.
commencement online. Kudos to your team. The men's team had like a 3.54 team GPA or
Mm-hmm.
something excellent. How did you shift gears, and even maybe give us some insight on how the team maybe even stayed together and motivated one another to make the best of what ended up being remote learning for the rest of the semester?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely put in work to stay connected and not just go our own ways and do our own thing. And I think part of that definitely had to do with Jimmy Chow and Rocky Campbell making an effort to have team Zoom meetings every now and then just to check in on people, make sure that we were all doing the work we were supposed to, but then also that we were mentally okay. Because I think that's a big part of that whole remote learning is that everything you can still learn the material, but you're missing out on key social parts of the academic experience. Group projects definitely don't feel the same over the internet. Um, so that was one thing. I think for me, I don't know how much necessarily changed. I think it was definitely harder to get motivated. I think. I don't think the quality of my work changed very much, but just getting the ball rolling was difficult.
Ryan Hayes, our guest on lcpioneers.com live, recently graduated senior for men's tennis. What brought you to Lewis and Clark initially? I mean, why did you choose Lewis and Clark for college? And what were some of the key moments that stood out to you as to the reason for picking it, and then actually lived up to those expectations over 4 years?
Yeah, so I was really interested in going to the Pacific Northwest for school. Just geographically, I didn't want to stay in California where I'd spent my entire life. I didn't really want to go to the East Coast, didn't want the Midwest, and kind of felt that the Pacific Northwest was kind of just the one that was left over when I kept checking other places off. Um, and so then going from there, I knew that I could be a better version of myself if I was at a smaller school. Um, because at a smaller school, you have more one-on-one interactions with your teachers. You have just a much smaller, tight knit community, and it's harder for you to get lost in the crowd and just become a number for your school. Um, and so that was pretty big for me. And then you add in the smaller stuff like the location of the school. Um, and there was one other thing, but I'm blanking on it. But the location of the school actually was pretty big for me, um, because all of the smaller things that you get to when you're picking a school, even though they're small, they still end up making a big part of it because, I mean, you're going to have to live with it for 4 years. Um, and I think the fact that Lewis and Clark is close enough to Portland that you can get away and go into the city and really find anything to do, but then it's also far enough away from the city where it's quiet and you can have a little bit of peace of mind. I really liked that.
Now, we mentioned magna cum laude graduate, double major in chemistry and mathematics. Was that
Yeah.
always going to be your path? Did you know exactly what you wanted to do?
Um, yes and no. I came in knowing that chemistry was something that I was really happy doing, and that it was something I felt like I was good at it, so I might as well just stick with it. Um, and so for that chemistry major, I needed to take a math class. I needed to take Calc 2 as a um, just a requirement of the major. I liked it, so I stuck with Calc 3, where I had Professor Eva Stavrov, and she's kind of the reason that I ended up picking math as a major to add on. Um, she was just kind of like, you really could do something here. And so I was like, okay, I guess I'll add a major.
Yeah,
Um,
I think it's
yeah.
neat how accomplished your team ended up being by the end of things too, with your senior class and some of the great accomplishments that have come out of the tennis program over the years. I'm curious, when you look at different opportunities to get involved directly. You mentioned earlier, class sizes, right? But also just building relationships with professors. One anecdote that I always hear from student athletes, because I only kind of get bits and pieces since I'm not a coach of a team. I just kind of hear people in snippets. Is this Rogers program, right? The
Mhm.
opportunity for you to get involved directly in research. What was that experience like?
Yeah, so the summer of my sophomore year, I worked in the lab of Dr. Casey Jones. I had just had her as an organic chemistry teacher my sophomore spring, I guess it would be. Um, and I really had a good connection with her. And I applied to be in the Rogers program. And so how that worked was there were a list of professors. They say what their research is. You see what's interesting to you. And so her research was in organic synthesis and how to figure out how to use a catalyst to make a reaction work at all or go faster. And I thought that was really interesting because I think mixing stuff around and seeing colors change is cool. Um, and so being there and having that opportunity to get to know who the professor is and then work in their lab and get your hands dirty a little bit, I think that's a really valuable experience. Because even if it's not something that you're completely like devoted to in that research, um, it's still an opportunity for you to learn and grow and find out what does interest you and then keep branching off of that.
Ryan Hayes, our guest on lcpioneers.com live. We are Tuesday through Friday, 11:30 a.m. Pacific time on Facebook Live. You can also watch us archived youtube.com/lcpios. Men's tennis program, recent graduate. And you talked about Jimmy Chow earlier, now the head coach of the program. He was a longtime assistant after competing for the Pioneers. What's it like, and even, adding in Rocky Campbell earlier, you can elaborate on the staff, but what is it like competing for Coach Chow's team and some of the mentorship that he provides for you?
Yeah, I mean, Jimmy very clearly cares about us. He cares how we're doing in the classroom. He cares how we're doing as people. He cares about what our tennis looks like. Um, and in the same sense, he almost doesn't care what our tennis looks like. Like, he wants us to perform as best as we can, but he knows that in order for us to get better, there are going to be some moments where we're not looking our best. But as long as it's on the road to better tennis, then it's worth it. And as long as we're putting in the work to get better, then that's good in his book. And I think having a coach that believes in you doing your thing, as long as it's beneficial to the team, I think that's really valuable. And he's definitely a very go with the flow, do what makes you the best version of yourself.
Now, I'm curious, when you look back at 4 years and being part of this team, I have to imagine there's some stories that come to mind. Kind of walk us through, some of the best memories of being with this tennis program that you were able to experience.
Yeah, so probably the biggest memories that have stood out to me would be our recent-ish trip crabbing. We went at the end of our fall semester, or our fall season, rather. We went on a trip to the Oregon coast. The eight of us, I guess there were, and our two coaches, Rocky and Jimmy, and we just went boating around rivers and trying to catch some crabs. We turned it into a really fun experience where we were split into two boats and competed with the other boat to see who could catch the most crabs. Um, and my boat ended up winning, so that was really exciting. um, yeah, we ended up having two, and the other boat ended up having five, but all of theirs were undersized, so we ended up having a surprise victory, which was nice. Um, and then at the end of it, we went to the Tillamook factory, which is not too far away, and got some really good food. So that was a big one for sure.
Well, you got to see the revamped Tillamook factory. I went to that bad boy, yeah, where they had added the restaurants, and you already had excellent ice cream at the Tillamook factory. But yeah, I mean, this endless flavor when you get out there.
Yeah, we got a couple orders of cheese fries. We each got a different burger, grilled cheese, something. Everything's just cheesy, creamy, so good.
Well, Coach Chow says, much love to you, big guy, in our comments below, and I know that he really went out of his way to make sure that his graduating seniors, both from the men's and women's program, had a chance to be as recognized as possible virtually.
Yeah.
And we certainly appreciate everything that your class did, especially persevering through the tough ends of the spring semester. What's ahead? When you look at future plans, what are some of the goals of yours post Lewis and Clark?
Yeah, so I got accepted into UC Berkeley for graduate school, so I'm going to be pursuing a PhD in nuclear engineering. After this, that'll be starting in a month or two. And so my work is going to be more on the chemistry side of that. So looking at how corrosion takes place in advanced nuclear reactors, um, and working that out so we can get the next generation of nuclear reactors up and running. Because I believe that that's the best route for cleaner energy, and especially with the amount of energy that's going to be required as our population grows. So I'm excited.
Well, I mean, I think it's a worthwhile cause. Certainly appreciate you thinking of that in terms of the greater good, which I see again reflected a lot in the Lewis and Clark community, both student athletes and the student body. Are you planning, is that going to be online, or do you have any certainty in terms of what that's going to look like?
Yeah, so what I've heard is that everything that doesn't need to be in person is going to be online. So classes are all going to be remote unless it's a lab course. Um, if I have research that I need to be doing, if there's an experiment that I need to run, then I would be on campus in the lab for that. But otherwise, any data crunching, any figure making, anything like that, that would be online from home.
Well, well, best of luck continuing to adapt as obviously we all are. We are looking forward as quickly as possible having everyone back on campus. Certainly
Yeah.
hope you'll come up to Portland and visit us throughout the years to come. Ryan Hayes, a men's tennis recent graduate, thanks for joining us on lcpioneers.com live.
Yep. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a fun conversation with him. Really impressive guy, and that program with Coach Chow. You have both programs, the men's and women's team, really competing or practicing a lot, spending a lot of time together. But then Men's team might take that trip out to Whitman and Whitworth while the women's team is at home, and then they flip flop. So they get a lot of different engagement with different coaches throughout the course of a year because sometimes Coach Chow will stay with the men's program, sometimes he'll travel with the men's program or vice versa, and it's really a unique family. I think it's really neat to see how that goes down because by and large, a lot of the teams that happen in the fall and spring, like a golf and a rowing, those two sports are usually competing at the same site. They kind of spend more time together. Whereas, the tennis programs, one will be at one place and one will be at another. And so you still hear the tremendous camaraderie that those two teams, have with each other. And any time that there is a meet or a match for one of the programs, you'll see the other program in the stands as well. I think it was cool to hear him talk about the trip doing the crabbing on the Oregon coast and so how that had a competitive element to it as well. So, really fun stories, and that's what's been neat about this program too is when guests come on, a lot of times they say something like, "Well, I don't exactly know what I want to talk about," and all we say is share stories. And when he brought up the crabbing, I mean, what a unique experience! Because one of the best parts about being in the Portland, Oregon area is because you're in the Pacific Northwest and you have access to all these beautiful mountains. The city of Portland provides a ton of population because Lewis and Clark is the only Northwest Conference institution in a city of 500,000 or more. But then you go another hour, hour and a half to the west, and there's so many coastal opportunities on the Oregon coast, including something unique like crabbing too. So fun stories. Appreciate Ryan taking the time to join us, and I appreciate you having you here as well. We'll look forward to having you back tomorrow. Planning to talk to very recent Hall of Fame inductee Amanda Phillips. She was the first Lewis and Clark All American for cross country. She also competed in track and field. Have a chance to talk to her. A really fun, deep story about what Lewis and Clark meant to her. So excited to have that on the show tomorrow. Her story on the show tomorrow, and then Jim Tersey, who is the dean of Northwest Conference soccer coaches. It seems he's been in the Portland area all his life. Um, Really a great guy, and excited to have him talk about his experience entering his 11th season as the head coach of Lewis and Clark women's soccer. So I will bring you his conversation on Friday. Already have some guests booked for next week. We'll let you know about them tomorrow as well. As always, if you have a suggestion for the show, always let us know in the comments below or email us sports@lclark.edu. Hi, Violet. Appreciate you joining the stream as well. Until we talk to you again tomorrow, as we are Tuesday through Friday at 11:30 a.m. Pacific time, I'm Ryan Goff. Thanks for having fun with us. Big thanks again to Ryan Hayes, and you can watch all of our past shows online at youtube.com/lcpios. So until we talk to you again tomorrow, goodbye, everybody.
I'm Casey Jones, and I teach a range of classes: general chemistry, organic chemistry, and also some advanced classes. And I have a research lab that currently I have 4 students working with me as part of the Rogers program. The summer experience is a way to get really deeply involved in the science that is here and be able to start to define what might be what you want to do next. So the brown bag gives our students a chance to explain their research and really show the context and the application of what they're doing to a very broad range of students and faculty.
It's interesting to be able to communicate to other scientists what your work is, and it forces you to learn how to talk about your subject so that not only experts in your field can understand it, but others can understand it as well, which I just believe is a good life skill.
To talk about your research in a way that anybody can understand it really is a valuable experience, and it's something that you don't get a lot of practice for except in these contexts. Because oftentimes you're giving a presentation to a classroom filled with people who know basically the same things that you do, but in a brown bag, you have to be able to explain and provide motivation for everything that you're working on and why it's important and why it's relevant to be studying.
Last year came back for more this year.
I think a way in which my liberal arts education has really helped me and my group formulate our ideas is that concept of critical thinking and having many different backgrounds, me being an econ major and my two group mates being chemistry majors, we really get that well-rounded background, well-rounded ideas.
I think overall it's absolutely worth doing. You find yourself not only being more prepared for, say, well, this next semester, on top of being more prepared for life in general.